Hey guys, in today's video we're going to be taking a look at my 2021 Yamaha XT250, and in this video I'm going to show you things that I don't like about the bike. So I've now owned the bike for 1 year and 8 months, and it was actually my very first motorcycle. And you're thinking, why'd you buy a brand new motorcycle when you know you're going to drop it? Well, on the classifieds, used ones from like 1973 were $4,000, and this out the door, I think it put me around 7 or 8. So it really wasn't that much more to get something 20-25 years newer. And so I personally feel it was worth the investment, although it does have a few battle scars. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the weight of the bike. I believe it sits around 293 or 300 pounds. I know that it's an enduro, so it's obviously going to weigh more than like a dirt bike, but this bike is pretty heavy. Personally, I only weigh about 110 pounds. So if I drop it, I can pick it up just fine, but if I drop it and I'm on a heel, it's really quite a mess, so I have to get some help. So I usually have to have a buddy come help me pick it up, and so that is one thing I don't like about the bike. Another thing I don't like about the bike is stock. It does not come with a factory skid plate. It does have some bars, so if you hit flat ground, you're not going to damage your engine, but I'm surprised it doesn't have a skid plate for being an enduro. And so thankfully I've never hit a rock, but I really should throw one on there soon as I do get more advanced and go on more difficult rocky trails. Another thing I don't love about this bike, I don't know if this is normal or not, but when I do drop the bike, the fuel actually leaks out pretty quick. So if you don't pick it up pretty quick, you could probably drain all your gas in, I'd guess, under 10 minutes, maybe longer. But the second you tip it over, it just starts running. So I don't know if it's a seal that maybe became defective or if that's normal for it to leak. But I definitely need to get that addressed just for when I am alone if I drop it and I'm not able to pick it up for, a good 30 minutes. Another pet peeve on this bike is the turn signal. I used to own a 2009 Yamaha Vino 125cc, and when you turn on the signal just like this, as you can see, it's on, but there's no audible noise. So oftentimes I'll signal if I'm driving in the city, and then that signal remains on for the next almost 5 to 10 minutes. My brother does this as well. He has I think it's called a WR250 or something, and I notice he drives with his turn signal on, but it's just very annoying because you'll be driving down the road and people think you're about to turn left, so they'll like cut you off, and then I'm like, oh, what was that for? And then I realize, oh wait, my turn signal's still on. So it is one thing that's very annoying because there's no audible click, so honestly you forget about it a lot. Another thing I'm not happy about with is this enduro is when I first dropped it on the right side, obviously you can tell the mirror's missing, but it totally messed it up. This was kind of manufactured cheaply, or maybe I just hit it just right, but the mirror totally busted off and it stripped out that whole thing. And to get this replaced, it looks like it's kind of welded here all one piece to the Brakemaster cylinder. So I know there's probably aftermarket options, but I was kind of bummed that that broke out on just a couple falls. All right, the next thing I don't like about the bike is when you're revving it up, regardless of the gear, the exhaust is pretty quiet, which is nice for riding. And I know that it's got the stock exhaust, which is supposed to be a spark arrestor, so you're not starting forest fires. There's this little thing here. I honestly don't know what it does, but all you do is you hear it rattle and rattle, and you hear it rattle over the sound of the exhaust, and it's quite annoying. Then the next thing I hate about it is actually the stock tire. So like I said, the bike is about 300 pounds. I weigh about 110, 120. But when I first started riding, this thing would just buck me off the back. Like I'd be holding on, I'm just getting thrown around, and it's almost like I don't have any traction when going uphill just because it's going up and down, going over bumps. But these stock tires, I really don't like them. The stock tires are okay for like rocks and gravel and like soft dirt and regular dirt. But when it comes to sand, you're not going anywhere, obviously. But even if it's just like very, very fine dirt, like this bike has a really hard time moving it all. And you kind of just have to walk it through the sandy spots. And then as well as mud. These tires, they honestly just spin a lot in the mud. Once these are worn down a little more, as you can see, this tire actually has 1,000 miles on it. I'd say half are on-road, half are off-road. So it's definitely been broken in, but I will be replacing these tires once the tread wears down a little more, and probably go aftermarket just with whatever the forms say. The next thing is 250. When riding, I mean, 250 is a good amount of power, but I really wish it had just a little bit more. Not a lot, but just a little. I'd like to be able to pop wheelies, which I can only do in probably first gear on this. I've only done it a few times, but I do wish it just had slightly more power. Then the last thing I don't love about this bike, remember I am a new rider, so I wasn't aware of this, but it's like the gear ratio or the sprockets, the way the transmission is geared. So I learned that you can actually replace the rear sprocket as well as the front sprocket, which is up and over here. But the way it's geared, when going downhill, I usually just engine brake, and you're either going too fast in second gear or too slow in first. And so there's really not a good ratio. So I'm going to do some research and probably end up replacing the sprockets. I don't love the way the bike is geared for off-road. Another thing I hate is the oil changes. I bought this brand new from the Yamaha dealership, and they charged me about $750 for something called the Pit Pass. And what that includes is, I think it's like the first... obviously the first break-in service, and then free services for the next, I think it's like 2 to 4 years. But this bike, it never has any issues or any problems, so that's very good. So I basically paid $750 for 2 oil changes, which would probably cost $10 to do at home to buy a bottle of oil and a crush washer. So I'm not really mad about that, you know, because I was new to riding. But with this bike, I don't feel that it's critical to buy that. Now, I know you guys think I'm probably just a noob, but like I said, I am a new rider. I've only put 1,000 miles on this bike, and I've owned it for 1 year and 8 months, driven it on and off road. But now I want to go over some of the things that I love about the bike, and honestly just disregard all the things I said I hate, because you should definitely buy a motorcycle if you're interested. This is an awesome bike. But the way they word it is the break-in period is very tedious and that you have to adjust the valves. But from what I've read online, it's very rare that you have to adjust the valves, and it's honestly not that hard of a job at home if you're semi-mechanically inclined. And it turned out when I took my bike in for initial break-in, literally all they did is change the oil. Next thing I love that it's got a digital speedometer as well as an odometer and a trip counter. I also like that it has a designated check engine light, so that way if you're, you know, hurting something, it's probably going to kick on and tell you, as well as a gas light, so when you're about to run out, that is nice. Next thing I love about this bike is the locking feature. If you push your key all the way down and twist it to the left instead of the right, like you're going to start it, it actually locks the steering column, and so it makes it a lot harder to steal. I'm sure a lot of bikes have this, but it's just one safety feature I like to enable when I'm going to be leaving it for an hour in the city in a parking lot. The next thing I love about this motorcycle is it's fuel injected. So instead of having a carburetor, it has fuel injection. So from what I understand, you don't have to do your carb cleaning. I'm sure there's still some services needed for this bike, but it's also a good thing when you're riding at higher altitudes. I know some people have to like rejet their carburetor or even make a tune, you know, when you're on a ride. But with this fuel injection system, I guess it just learns as you go. So it's always started regardless of what elevation I'm at. Another thing I love about the bike, total in maintenance in about 2 years, I think I've spent $40 on the 4 oil changes as well as this bulb I got from AutoZone. Next thing I love about the bike is the main color of all the plastics. I know the older model, they come in like this tan color or white. The problem with the white is once it's used, it's very dirty. I know you can take like a magic eraser to it, but I do love the color of this machine. Another thing I like about the bike is it's never left me stranded. It's always started, and it's overall just a really good bike, very reliable. One thing that I don't like is the headlight is always on. So when you're riding, you know, you usually switch this off and stop and talk for 10 minutes. But if you don't turn your key to the off position, your headlight is always on. So the battery actually did die one time when I did that, but thankfully we had a solar panel and I was able to charge it up. And after I charged it up, I realized that I probably could have just dumped the clutch and got a rolling start down a hill, and that probably would have started it up and had the battery recharge. Another thing I love about the bike is you can easily fit 2 people. I'm not that good of a rider, so I actually ended up taking off my foot pegs for a second rider, but basically there's a V shape that comes down here with an extra fold-out foot peg, but I took both those off just to remove it. It was only 10 pounds, but honestly I'll probably just add them back on. And the seat is plenty big. I usually sit about right here, and you still got all this back here. Then coming back to the rear, another thing I love about this bike is these handles. They're awesome if you're trying to tie it down, even though I usually just tie mine down and put a small load on the suspension. But these are awesome if you have a second rider or just if you're stuck in the mud. It's a really good solid place to pick it up and just lift up on the bike. Another thing I love about the bike, I think the gas tank is only like 1.9 or 3 gallons max. But I literally drive this bike almost every day, and it's usually just to go grab food and maybe stop at the post office to drop something off. So it's a pretty small trip, but I literally have to fill this bike up every 3 weeks or almost every month. And so it's crazy that I've also never seen the gas light come on. This thing just doesn't use any gas. I think it gets about 76 mpg, and that's even when you drive it pretty aggressive. Like, it's not that I'm redlining it everywhere, but I am shifting in the higher RPMs, and this thing just doesn't use any gas. It's awesome. Well, that's basically the end of this video. If you're thinking about getting a Yamaha XT250, I would say go for it. Either buy it used, just make sure it was well taken care of, or even buying new. I personally don't feel is a bad option. And like I said, the reason I bought new is because it was only about $3,000 or $4,000 more to buy brand new. And, you know, if I go to sell this bike in like 20 or 30 years, I feel like I can still get like $4,000. Like, they really don't depreciate hard like newer sedans or cars or things like that. They're motorcycles. It's kind of a strange market that I'm not too familiar with, but I don't plan on selling the bike. I would like to get a TW200 Yamaha bike just for fun, but for now, I think this one will hold me off until I have more space in the garage. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more.